Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. Now one question I get probably more than anything else is asking me for predictions of the old school RuneScape market. And I usually don't answer those questions, and it's not really because I'm trying to hide all this insider knowledge or anything. The reality is it's really hard to predict markets. It's hard to predict stock markets in real life, and it's hard to predict the RuneScape market as well. So today I wanted to answer the question, can you predict the old school RuneScape market? This is kind of a multi-layered question with not a clear answer, so I'm going to be talking from a couple of different angles here, because the short answer to this question is yes and no. Not a very satisfying answer, but probably more accurate than a straight yes or a straight no. Anyway guys, I hope you are enjoying the videos lately. If you are, I would really appreciate it if you took the time to subscribe to my channel. Always helps out a lot. And if you want to get notified whenever I upload, hit that notification bell and you'll never hear the end of me. Alright guys, let's get started. Now first up here, I thought we'd have a look at how the Grand Exchange compares to the real life stock market, because there are quite a few similarities and a few differences. One of the big differences is the Grand Exchange doesn't have live data for us to look at. The best we have is the OSBuddy API, which is very incomplete because it only tracks a portion of the total trades. And on top of that, even if it was complete, we only get data every 15 minutes, I think, at max. So that is an eternity when it comes to stock market trading. But the obvious benefit of that is it creates much larger margins. So the way that people would, for example, flip on the Grand Exchange versus day trading on the stock market is going to be quite a bit different. For example, if I go and hop onto Quest Trade, which is my brokerage, you can see that the data is updated every couple seconds, really. Now, another really key difference is the scale of the market. RuneScape is a fairly popular game, but the amount of people that use the Grand Exchange is peanuts compared to the stock market. But on the flip side of this, there are quite a few similarities as well. The different forces that affect the Grand Exchange are very similar to the stock market. Now first up here we have game updates in RuneScape, which are kind of similar to government policy. These are things that kind of change the rules of the game. We take that, of course, literally in RuneScape and more figuratively in the stock market. In RuneScape, we could be adding a +2 strength bonus to the Fremennik helm for some reason, and in real life it could be a new tariff on a certain imported good or new regulations. Now another pretty important force that affects the Grand Exchange are influential players, like for example if a player like Wooks says the Dragonenter Lance is better than the Dragonenter Crossbow, that is going to have a tangible effect on those items' prices. Now in the real life stock market, the exact same thing can happen. For example, we have someone like Warren Buffett who is saying that he's going to sell off his position in airline companies, and Warren Buffett has so much influence that airline stocks are most likely going to take a hit on, well, I guess tomorrow. Or another example is Elon Musk recently saying that his stock evaluation for Tesla, his own company, is too high. Questionably legal on that one, I don't really know. Now surprisingly, another force that can affect the RuneScape economy is the average player. Now this is something kind of unique to old school RuneScape or RuneScape, but it's actually possible for the average player to affect item prices, and that is through mediums like Reddit, through memes, Discord channels. It's actually possible for a single person to influence other people's decisions, and that can actually make it up to jagex. And that kind of comes down to our economy being at a much smaller scale, and everyone kind of having a voice through our voting system and by having direct channels to moderators. Now obviously there are other forces out there, but those are just some I wanted to highlight. So with all that taken into account, why is it hard to predict the old school RuneScape market, and can you predict it? So let's maybe start off here with why it's way easier to predict the Grand Exchange over the real life market. And the main reason is that there are way less factors to consider, way less information you need to consume to have a good understanding of where the market is headed. Really the only things you need to consider are game updates when they come out, the weekly question and answers, and you'd also kind of maybe need to troll around Reddit and other forums to look for more information, but that is it. That's a pretty small amount of information you need to go over to have a good understanding. Another interesting difference is that we have alchemy prices, which means for certain items, the risk can be very low because it's already at its alch value and can't drop further, which means there are almost entirely safe investments out there which don't exist in real life. Now the alchemy price will hold things at a certain value, but on top of that, these are singular items, they're not really companies, and as such, items can't drop below 1 GP, they can't go bankrupt, and so far, for the most part, items can't be deleted. Generally, you're going to have way less competition, there are not going to be nearly as many people trying to predict the market, even though the barrier to entry is much lower, and you're not going to have to worry about any fees or anything like that. Now, the important question here is, why is it so hard to predict the Grand Exchange? A ton of people have succeeded, a ton of people have failed. Somebody's even trying to predict the Grand Exchange with machine learning. Pretty interesting. I'll leave a link in the description for that. Now, the main reason it's so hard, it just comes down to the way stock markets work. The price of an item is not based on what it's actually worth when you consider factors like the relative strength of the item, the quantity, stuff like that. It really comes down to what people think it's worth. It's a pretty small difference, but it's a big difference. Now, generally, when an item gets buffed, people think it's going to be worth more, and it is worth more. And when items are nerfed, things will go down, and that is generally what happens. But not always. A really good example recently is the Inquisitors Armour Set. Let's have a look at the Inquisitor's Hallberg. Now, on April 16th, this item actually got buffed. There was a new set effect added that actually gave it a bit more damage if you have everything equipped. Now, if we have a look on GE Tracker on April 16th, we can look that the item actually went down very severely from 360 down to 230, and I've had a few questions about this, and it's a pretty simple answer, and that is that this was already priced into the market. So yes, this item did get buffed, but people already knew that it was most likely going to receive a buff, and most likely the expectation is that it would either be higher or more impactful. Now, because this expectation was already taken into account at the item price on April 15th or April 16th, it actually went down, even though the item objectively got better. Now, this can really complicate things when it comes to predicting future item prices, because I'm sure the majority of people would have assumed it would go up in price with a buff. Now, a good comparison to the real-life stock market is a couple of weeks ago, there was a huge article and some numbers released how unemployment is at record highs because of the issue at hand. So many people are unemployed. Some of the worst financial news in the last century. And what does the stock market do? It actually has one of the better days that week. It goes up a pretty significant amount. And that is because that bad news was already assumed and already priced into the market. And most likely that news was actually better than what people assumed, or not nearly as bad, causing the stock market to actually go up. Now, another factor that makes it really hard to predict the RuneScape market is the fact that all of our game updates, or I should say most of them, have to be polled in advance. So everything needs to be put to a vote, every decision, which in a way is a much truer democracy than most real-life governments. But that means when things are put to a poll, we don't know if it's going to pass or not. But I find it so fascinating how polling can actually affect the RuneScape market. The reality is that people don't often know if things are going to pass a poll or not, which means that if you're trying to predict the price of a future item, you really have to take that into account. If, for example, there's going to be a proposed buff on the blowpipe, when it's put to a poll, the item is most likely going to increase in price, just reacting to the percentage chance that it could pass. And if it does end up passing, who knows, it could go up more, it could go down. And if it fails a poll completely, then the item could crash again. And there's even another layer to this that I think is just so fascinating. Now, to explain this, I think it would be a lot easier to look at the Sirens Tome. Now, the Sirens Tome was something that was going to be built out of a mage's book, and the general consensus of the item was that it was too strong. Now, because of that, Jagex decided to actually nerf the item before a poll. Now, what happened when Jagex nerfed the Sirens Tome is actually the mage's book increased in value, which at first glance seems kind of counterintuitive. The item that the mage's book would be building into got weaker, so why is it increasing in price? The reason is that it became more likely that it would actually pass a poll. Most people thought it wouldn't pass, and that was priced into the market already. Now, because of all these layers of complication, it makes it very challenging to consistently predict the RuneScape market. And what you really need to focus on is trying to predict how other people are going to predict the market. That's going to be your best chance. Now, with that said, I have had some luck in the past doing stuff like this, because in some circumstances, it's going to be actually kind of easy to predict what other people are going to predict. And the only time I have consistently succeeded in predicting market changes is when quick and unknown changes happen. If, for example, Jagex all of a sudden releases a integrity change to Zulrah, adding a pretty hefty quest requirement behind it, and we're like literally one of the first few people to read the blog, we go ahead and buy as many Zulrah scales, as many blowpipes, as many toxic tridents as possible. Almost every time there's going to be a massive increase in price, and then you just kind of ride the hype upwards and then try to make a quick buck. That is the success I've had. So to kind of conclude here, yes, I think it is possible to predict the RuneScape market, but no, it is not going to be nearly as easy as most people think. And I think for the majority of players, they're just going to be taking a gamble, which could pay off big time or you could lose everything. Anyway, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have anything you want to discuss or anything you think I missed the mark on, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.